No last 2-minute report. No public rating. On the Aces, Liberty finish we're about to break down, the WNBA stayed silent, and that's the problem. The common belief is simple. New York earned a clean edge in a heavyweight clash and took the series lead because stars made plays. The contrarian truth is harsher. When a single, contact-heavy possession decides a game between the Las Vegas Aces and New York Liberty, the absence of a last 2-minute report leaves fans, players, and coaches without accountability. So we built the receipts ourselves. Here's the plan. We'll answer 3 questions the title makes you ask. What precisely happened on the Aces' final trip that made this finish controversial? Why does the WNBA's lack of an L2M change the stakes, optics, and leverage in the postseason? And how would public rating, clearer replay standards, and consistent late-game guidelines alter outcomes in a rivalry this tight? By the 10-second mark, here's your first proof. The NBA has a formal last 2-minute program that publicly grades whistles and notable non-calls. The WNBA does not. That gap isn't a footnote, it's the entire story. Let's rehook with the question you're already thinking. What actually happened on that final Aces possession? And why are people convinced the whistle should have blown? Late game. Margin tight. The Aces are exactly where they want to be, ball in the hands of a star who has lived in this moment for 3 seasons of title or bust basketball. You've seen the pattern all year. Spacing to pull a helper away, an empty corner to bait the switch, then a strong side attack that forces helper fouls. Freeze the broadcast angle when the ball handler plants. The defender's forearm rides into the shooting pocket. Hip contact disrupts the gather, and there's wrist-to-ball contact as the shot rises. It's not a football tackle. It's the kind of high-leverage, marginal contact that either gets whistled or decides a championship path without a horn. If you've tracked how New York bodies drivers at the nail, showing chest, swiping late, then recovering to box out, you know the blueprint. The Aces built their endgame on drawing that second defender into an unavoidable decision, concede a pull-up or risk a foul. On this possession, the advantage is created, the contact is clear enough to alter the release, and yet the whistle stays in the pocket. Without a public L2M, the official word on whether that's a correct no-call or a missed foul never arrives. That silence isn't neutral. It tilts the post-game narrative toward whoever won and leaves the loser labeled as complainers instead of stakeholders with a legitimate grievance. The payout here is simple. At the exact moment a transparent league would clarify the final call, the WNBA's silence forces fans to pick a side on vibes, not verified grading. Why does the lack of a last 2-minute report explode into something bigger than one missed call? Because in a 5-game series, a single win changes the entire math. Historically, when a team grabs the opening edge in a best-of-5, the odds swing decisively toward the leader. That's not internet conjecture, that's decades of playoff history. If you're Becky Hammon, and your roster falls behind because a late whistle goes the other way, you aren't just chasing a scoreboard, you're swimming upstream against probability. Momentum in these matchups isn't a cliche. It shows up on film the next game as defenders hug one extra step closer to shooters, as drivers hesitate on bumps they expect won't be called, as rotations slow a half beat because the brain remembers the last ending. Public L2M grades exist to pierce that fog. They assign accountability, correct tendencies, and reset expectations for the next game, so players don't ref the game themselves by anticipating which contact won't be called. In the NBA, a blown whistle on Friday becomes a note everyone sees on Saturday. In the WNBA, the file stays closed. The payout is that series leverage moves not only on shot-making, but on interpretive officiating that no one outside the league office ever gets to audit. Did the Aces actually get robbed? Or is this just the pain of losing close? Start with tape before you argue intent. Chart the last 2 minutes. Entry attempt, denial, rescreen to shake the primary, then the critical drive. Pause at frame contact. You can see the defender's arm impede the shooting motion. Verticality is compromised, space is invaded. Look at the shooter's follow-through. It's truncated and veers offline. If this same motion draws a whistle mid-second quarter, and you can find plenty of possessions in this rivalry where it has, then swallowing the whistle in the final 5 seconds is either a philosophical choice or a miss. Coaches live with philosophy. They can game plan for, let them play if it's consistent. What they can't game plan for is a coin flip, where similar contact produces different outcomes depending on time, venue, or reputation. That's where public grading matters. If the report says correct no call, defenders adjust to play through arms up and body on. If it says incorrect non-call, then both teams recalibrate late game contact. Without that, we're all litigating screenshots and slow motion clips while the series score marches on. The payout. Absence of clarity becomes a competitive factor, not a neutral backdrop. How does this impact star calculus? The way Aya Wilson, Kelsey Plum, or Jackie Young attack when whistles tighten. Late in a series, the aces thrive on second chance creation and downhill pressure. If the stars begin to suspect drives won't be rewarded, they shift to kickouts earlier, live on pull-ups, and lean more heavily on offensive rebounding to manufacture free throws from putbacks instead of first contact drives. That plays directly into New York's hands because the Liberty's half-court defense is built to challenge pull-ups with length and contest threes with size at the wings while trusting a backline rebounder to clean up. Everybody knows Jonquil Jones has eaten boards in these moments. The aces know it too. The strategic cost of a whistle that doesn't come isn't just one possession. It's a ripple that nudges shot distribution away from the aces' most efficient actions and into New York's comfort zones. The payout, one silence from the officials, shifts the map of the aces' offense for the next game before the ball even goes up. Why haven't we solved this with a simple statement from the league after controversial finishes? In a fully transparent system, you'd see 3 layers. First, immediate pool report answers for procedural questions. Was the contact reviewed? Did the crew deem the defender vertical? Second, a publicly posted L2M style grade that explicitly labels a correct call or incorrect non-call. Play-by-play, with timestamps and crew names. Third, internal assignment adjustments based on performance, because transparent grading must link to professional accountability. Instead, the WNBA's posture has been to keep those assessments in-house. Executives and supervisors surely review film. Crews absolutely self-scout. Performance matters. But without a public-facing document, the community never sees the difference between we stand by the call and we got it wrong. That vacuum invites conspiracy and drowns out legitimate, fixable process gaps like standardizing verticality interpretations in the restricted area, tightening hand-check definitions at the elbow, and clarifying how incidental contact is weighed when a shooter's arm angle changes mid-gather. What do we actually learn from endgame mechanics on the controversial aces possession? The camera tells you who initiates contact, but mechanics tell you who is supposed to see it. In late-game ISO, the lead official's primary is feet and verticality. The slot reads arm contact across the lane. The trail monitors displacement and illegal screens behind the ball. When 2 defenders converge and the shooter spins into the lane line, the most likely eyes on wrist-to-ball contact are the slot. If you don't see a hand-to-hand swipe, you may default to body up as marginal. But slow the footage, and you can spot arm compression before the release point. Without a public grade, we never know whether the league tagged that moment, marginal, or incorrect non-call. And if the same crew chief has a tendency to let chest-to-chest contact ride, but whistle at wrist contact on rise, coaches can adjust by calling a handoff rather than a straight-line drive to force a different angle. With no report, that chessboard stays in the dark and the next endgame becomes another guessing game instead of a tactical refinement. Money, optics, and power. The WNBA is having its highest stakes seasons ever. Audience growth, stars stepping into mainstream culture, rivalries built to trend. With that growth comes the absolute requirement to show your work after the biggest moments. Transparency isn't an attack on officials, it's a shield for them. A published grade saying correct no call protects crews from bad faith pylons and teaches fans the distinctions between verticality and displacement. A published incorrect non-call is not the end of the world. It's a moment of credibility, a signal that performance is reviewed and improved. In the NBA, you can chart which referees grade best in crunch time and still see them work deep into the playoffs. Accountability doesn't end careers, it sharpens them. For teams like the Aces, whose season arcs swing on 3 plays per game against a super team like New York, that clarity is a competitive necessity. For the Liberty, it's a fairness tool that validates hard, physical defense when it's done inside the rules. For the league, it's an inoculation against the narrative that the refs decided it, and a message to the next million casual viewers that outcomes are measured, not massaged. Coaches and players will always complain after losses, That can be true, and still not the whole story. When you've got on-film contact that alters a shot and no public review, the complaint isn't just sour grapes. It's a petition for a system that matches the stakes on the floor. Think of how quickly a single line in a report would cool the temperature. Contact occurs to the off arm after ball release. Marginal, incidental, correct no call. Or the other way. Defender makes contact to the wrist before the ball leaves the hand. Incorrect non-call. Personal foul should have been assessed. Either outcome restores a baseline. Teachable, repeatable, auditable. Instead, the conversation drifts toward the worst possible place, impugning intent, because we lack the document that cleanly settles the only question that matters. What actually happened under the rulebook definition? So what about next time? The Aces aren't done with New York. Not emotionally, not tactically. One film session, and you can already sketch the counter. Expect Becky Hammond to widen the floor with an empty side action that forces the slot's attention away from the ball, then swing into a pin down to handback that creates a downhill lane where the first contact happens outside the restricted area, under the eyes of the trail official. If the first bump gets called there, the entire geometry of the possession changes. Expect the Aces to hunt Jonquil's hips with early seals to freeze, help, and open space for a finish without arms tangled. Expect Jackie Young to probe with a 2-foot stop, baiting the defender into a swipe across the forearms that is either called or replay reviewed. The point isn't to work the refs, it's to reframe the action so that the contact decision is easier to see, easier to whistle, and easier to grade publicly if the league ever chooses to step into the modern standard. Missing reports hurt winners, too. If you're the Liberty, and you play brutally disciplined positional defense for 38 minutes, you deserve a document that says so. A late no-call labeled correct. A day later silences the noise and cements your identity as legal, physical, championship ready. Without it, you inherit asterisks you didn't write and spend your pressers pushing back on narratives instead of previewing adjustments. Rivalries at this altitude deserve clarity because both teams are built to live in the margins. New York wins with length, rotations, and matchups. Vegas wins with pace, strength, and leverage. Those styles collide into bodies. That collision needs a public ledger. What happened on the Aces' final possession? Enough contact to alter a release without a corresponding whistle, the precise kind of play an L2M would grade and explain. Why does the lack of an L2M matter? Because in a 5-game series, and in the court of public perception, untallied errors or unverified correct no-calls shift leverage, media framing, and even how players attack the next game. How would transparency change outcomes? It would replace guesswork with standards. Crews would see their grades and lock in on consistency. Coaches would build game plans around confirmed interpretations, not superstitions. Players would know which contact profiles get the whistle, and which don't when it matters most. The summary is blunt. In one of the league's marquee matchups, the Aces and Liberty walked into a playoff-caliber ending and walked out with a talking point instead of a teaching tool. That's fixable. A public L2M isn't about embarrassing officials, it's about elevating the product. The insider takeaway is this: great leagues don't just get the call right more often, they show their work when the call is questioned. If you're serious about growth, you're serious about trust. And if you're serious about trust, you expose the final 2 minutes to the light. Before you click away, here's your next step. If you want to understand how locker rooms really talk about this stuff, assignments, tendencies, leverage plays, our Locker Room Confidential series is the essential sequel. That's where we dig into referee profiles, late gameplay calling trees, and the power dynamics that move championships. Watch that next and finish the play the league didn't.